afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Access to Quality Education and Training, an Intercultural Approach. My name is Anna Comacchio, and I'm the Project and Policy Officer at the Assembly of European Regions, AR, which is the largest independent network of regional authorities in the wider Europe. And I will be your moderator for today, together with a very distinguished panel of speakers, which I will introduce to you in a moment. But before that, I would like to mention that this is the last of a series of 5 webinars that we have organized within the Includ-EU project led by IOM. The goal of the project is to contribute to building more cohesive societies and inclusive. And we do that by enhancing transnational knowledge sharing, cooperation and partnership between local and regional authorities in Greece, Italy, Romania, Slovenia and Spain. We relied on the importance of this structure and meaningful interaction on integration, and we try to capitalize from the knowledge at the local and regional level. So yes, the project, in fact, it also counts on support of the Intercultural Regions Network of AR and the Council of Europe Intercultural Approach. Of which at the heart lies the interculturality principle, together with quality, diversity management, and interaction. So, and so finally, the project is funded, of course, by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund of the European Union. Yes, why we believe that the Intercultural Regions Network is important next to the Intercultural Cities Network of the Council of Europe is because local authorities are of course keys, but also regional authorities play a key roles in many countries because they are in fact the one, they have essential competencies when it comes, for instance, to health, jobs, and education in many countries. So we are glad to see that actually many of our members are here, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion. And finally, just to give you a brief introduction on what our webinar is going to be about. We know that there are significant barriers to quality education and trainings when it comes to access for third country national. And these actually impact their learning, personal development, and access to the labor market. So we are today going to discuss what are the current challenges in accessing education for migrants and refugees, what has changed in the past years, and how perhaps the crisis from the pandemic, but also the recent Ukrainian refugee crisis has exacerbated the situation, or perhaps even unveiled a problem that was not on the surface. So eventually providing new opportunities on how to unlock further the potential of education and training for inclusion of migrants and vulnerable groups. So at the end of the webinar, hopefully we will have a better understanding of also what it means to have an intercultural approach when it comes to education and training. And I'm now glad to give the stage to our partner, IOM, and in particular to Emanuela Di Paola. She is Integration and Technical Cooperation Unit Coordinator at IOM, also part of the Coordination Office for the Mediterranean. And she will give an opening on the importance of empowering students through education to be agent of change for more inclusive society. So please, Eleonora.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today with all of you. As a education and social inclusion focal point within our mission, I would like to briefly give you an overview of IOM vision and perspectives in terms of empowering youth as lifelong learners. So through education and activities aimed at building more inclusive school and universities communities. IOM is committed to ensure equal chances for third country nationals and people with migratory background in accessing quality learning opportunities at all levels of education. of course, in a lifelong perspective. To do so, we have a focus on engaging youth as drivers of social inclusion. And we try to promote inclusive education in all our actions, as inspired by the EU Action Plan on Integration and Social Inclusion, which, as you know, encourages to take actions to towards more inclusive academic and school communities, especially focusing on faster recognition of qualification and also language learning. As we all know, students who are well integrated within their an education system, they both academically and socially have more chances to be active, to reach their potential. So in this context, the role of schools and universities is crucial, because they represent creative hubs where a holistic approach, so a comprehensive approach, is adopted or sometimes should be adopted towards the human growth of students and youth in general. So we think that, and we know that schools and universities must provide opportunities for lifelong learning in formal, non-formal, and informal settings, to facilitate, to encourage the progression of the students from the early childhood school to university and to labor market when they enter the society as adults. So basically, in educational places, young individuals need to be equipped with tools, with information to develop life skills and competencies, which are fundamental for them to be active citizens and to fully participate in the societies where they belong. What I'm saying is not just theory, because as IOM, we actually experienced the results of mobilizing youth as actors of social inclusion. So our perspective is very much based on experience. In fact, IOM proposed has been proposing in the last years a youth-led approach to social cohesion by promoting mentorship schemes, especially in universities, through regional and national initiatives, namely the Tandem Project and the Mentorship Project, which is actually mentioned and included in the briefing, which will be launched today as a good practice. So basically, we implemented the mentorship model, which means which is based on a peer-to-peer approach. So students act as mentors and accompany other students in their other students with migratory background in their journey to become full members of the academic communities and the cities where they belong. And this turned into a great opportunity for them to be aware of their talents and to use them to acquire new competencies through experience, through actions, through activities, through trainings. So we actually can prove that when youth is given responsibilities, when youth is empowered, when it's encouraged to take ownership, they are eager to act, and they actually act as a catalyst of something new, of change, of innovation, of creativity. So in these terms, we can say that peer-to-peer support is a way for empowering youth to also progress in skills acquisition and in self-development. So it's like a learning by doing process where students acquire knowledge-based competencies, but also competencies which come from experience. such as analytical thinking, problem solving, or effective communication skills, or intercultural communication competencies. So it's like a whole package. It's knowledge, it's awareness, it's skills, which contribute to students' personal growth as lifelong learners. And we also notice a very nice multiplier effect. So youth actions can have a very have the potential to have this multiplier effect on their peers and in general on the whole student community. So I think we can surely say that education has to support youth in obtaining skills, in find their own potential, and in continuously developing their capacities at all levels. So we notice, we know, we prove that this can have positive effects also on the communities and on the societies. So basically, this is why education and has to be a priority for in the national and regional policies, and this is why institutions at all levels, educational hubs, and civil society must engage in actions aimed at empowering youth in build on their potential, but also in seizing opportunities to be main actors, key actors in the society they act and they live in. So we strongly believe that it's crucial to enable youth to unleash their potential in order for them to become to really become catalysts of change and of integration, of inclusion in our societies. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for highlighting so many important concepts. Especially that education is a constant priority. We see that sometimes it's not so perceived, and on the importance of nurturing talents and skills of youth, not only with the migrant backgrounds, but also on the non-migrant backgrounds, so that they can also see the benefits, because that's what we, in fact, it's not only about them, but there is this diversity that brings an advantage and benefits for the whole society. So that's very, very important. And okay, so now we move on to Bruno Mesquita Valli. I hope pronunciation is correct, as Chief of Unit in the Capacity Development and the Field Support at UNESCO. UNESCO, of course, you all know it. It is the only actually agency with a mandate in higher education, and it plays a key role in the global effort to improve access to education for all students, regardless of their background. And they've been working now because of the recent Ukrainian refugee crisis on mapping host countries' education responses to the influx of Ukrainian students. So I'd like to ask Bruno to share with us, what are the current responses in places in Europe, and what is the aim of the mapping more generally? What are the key considerations regarding this emergency, and how to make the most out of the tools that were already in place and the experiences also that we have at disposal. So the floor is yours, Bruno.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen first, and then, okay. Can you please confirm you can see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, thank you so much. So again, thank you very much for the invitation. I think, Anna, your introduction resonates enormously with UNESCO's core mission, with education and intercultural dialogue as key pathways to achieve peace. The focus of today's webinar also resonates with our holistic mandate in education, from early childhood education to TVET, higher education, formal, non-formal, and informal settings. So As you said, my presentation will provide an overview of how host countries are catering for the arrival of refugees that have been compelled to move outside Ukraine due to the war. And I'll also try to cover all levels of education, hoping this will set the scene for discussions today. So a quick overview first of the exercise. So it builds on UNESCO's core function of acting as the clearinghouse and catalyst for knowledge. So we did a similar exercise monitoring school closures during the last years of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have identified the value that such mapping can have to help circulate information and inform policy debate. So we started covering 29 countries, and we're moving now to 40 countries. This is a living exercise. The website is constantly updated based on how information is released by the different countries. So it's been updated in waves, and next week we're going to have the 40 countries listed in the slide available in the website. I'll put later on the link in the chat in case you haven't seen it. And the information found is based on the moment on desk review. So we're using official sources, usually from the Ministry of Education, but sometimes we are challenged by language limitations. We try to use Google Translate to mobilize colleagues with language skills to undertake this work internally. But there might be some gaps, and there certainly are some gaps. But through our research, we have clustered information around 3 core themes. So how the learners are being integrated by education level, including language provisions and exams and credits, recognition, and so on, teachers and school personnel, and financial resources. And in terms of next steps, we will be sending a survey to all member states, part of the mapping, to capture the information that we might have missed. And we're going to be also producing more discussion on best practices and what works, also bear in mind the scale of the situation in each country, knowing that Poland, with a large number of refugees, will not necessarily adopt, for instance, the same policy directions as a country not in the spotlight, let's say Cyprus or countries more to the western side of Europe. So going to the content part. So in terms of finding of how the Ukrainian learners are being integrated, we found that many countries are using actually existing programs they already had to include foreigners in their national education systems. So the majority of countries rely on special transition or preparatory classes. So these are classes that will prepare students to eventually join mainstream schools. Many countries are undertaking this path: Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Greece, Poland, Spain, Norway. Many of them mentioning bridging, reception, preparatory, or adaptation classes. And these transition classes, they provide language classes. They will familiarize students with the local education system and the families as well. They will provide counselors for psychological support. They will evaluate existing competencies. And as the students will start to strengthen their language skills, they will be evaluated and then gradually move into regular classes. Other findings show that some countries are actually offering public education with instruction in minority languages. So Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, Latvia, Georgia, Luxembourg. In Lithuania, for instance, there are schools in Belarusian, German, and Polish. And in Romania, some schools are offering instruction in Ukrainian. And we also have some countries that are, although they are prioritizing the integration of students in their own schooling systems, they're also supporting distance education for Ukrainian students as a parallel or additional educational offering. So in such countries such as Albania, Czechia, Latvia, and Moldova, these offerings sometimes are coordinated with Ukrainian embassies, or they are directly coordinated with the Ukrainian Ministry of Education using the official Ukrainian distance education platform. Other interesting findings on this first theme on how the learners are being integrated is that some countries are actually facilitating existing process specifically to support the inclusion of Ukrainian students. So here we're talking about specific measures for the Ukrainian crisis. Some countries are simplifying or expediting procedures to join schools, for instance, in Georgia, Portugal, and Spain. Others are including waiving regular documentation requirements. That's the case in Belgium, for Flanders, and Spain as well. In Romania, for instance, in case of missing certificates in higher education, the students are evaluated and they can be granted transferable credits to continue their studies. Other countries are fast-tracking procedures to grant equivalence of foreign qualifications. That's the case of Austria, Estonia, and Portugal. And other are just waiving examinations. So for instance, Belgium, they have waived examinations in upper secondary schools. They're replacing it with a pedagogical review carried out by an educational team. And in Latvia, minor Ukrainian civilians, they are not required to pass state examinations in basic education or vocational training. And then other specific support for Ukrainian students include extra funding that are allocated to schools and also financial support provided directly to students and their family. And when it comes to vocational training, at the moment, many countries are providing access to their vocational training centers to Ukrainian refugee students, but not many countries have shared specific directives on how this access would occur. This is something that we need to dive a little bit deeper. Perhaps this will be the occasion today to learn more about that. But in Lithuania, Ukrainians can enroll in one of 56 vocational institutions, and depending on capacities, they can have their studies sponsored or discounted. In Estonia, foreign language curriculum in vocational schools are primarily in Russia, but there's one training center in English. And in Norway, some municipalities are carrying out a competency mapping of newly arrived Ukrainians. And based on this mapping, they are assigning Ukrainians to transition programs, including at the vocational level. And sometimes they can even fast track the program for those that have skills that are demanded by local labor markets. So facilitating the immediate integration of Ukrainian families and also generating income for them. Moving to the second theme, that is quite a big theme actually, which is about teachers and school personnel. The large influx of Ukrainian refugees are posing particular challenges to education systems. The teachers need support in facing language barriers, how to slowly incorporate the international students into a welcoming classroom, how to discuss the war, how to provide cultural and psychological support to students. And also there are also problems in terms of number of teachers able to take on board the additional classes that may need to be created in certain countries. So some countries are actually looking to how to employ Ukrainian teachers that have fled Ukraine as teachers. So Germany and France, for instance, they are planning to train and employ Ukrainian teachers, and Spain is planning a temporary integration of teachers from Ukraine to support Ukrainians in schools. Poland has eased rules on teaching diplomas obtained in Ukraine will be considered equivalent to Polish teaching diplomas. There will be a fast-track recognition process. And in Slovakia, they will facilitate the employment of Ukrainian teachers during this emergency period, waiving the regular clean criminal record procedure for teachers that usually is in place at the country. In both North Macedonia and Serbia, the Ukrainian teachers' integration into their schooling system will be facilitated with support from the e-twinning initiative at the European level. Other popular measure that many countries are adopting is to employ Ukrainian citizen speakers as assistant teachers, and also to increase the number of host country teachers. So for instance, Romania is addressing the shortages by allowing students from state and private universities and also retired teachers to provide teaching and school counseling during this period. I know, conscious of time, all this information can be accessed at the website. I'm going to perhaps move into the very last. I will share with you here, as I said in the chat, the access to the website. There are country sheets for each country where you can access by theme, and of course some level of analysis of these major trends, some of which I have tried to summarize today in the spirit of this webinar. I'll end my presentation here with my contact details together with my colleague Lemma, who unfortunately could not join us today. And I'm happy to take any questions by email or through the chat. Thank you, Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Very great overview. I think Indeed, thank you for mentioning. Thank you, Joanna. Also, we will take questions, of course, so please feel free to input them in the chat. We'll just wait for the discussion at the end. So yes, I believe you mentioned, well, it was really interesting to see, for instance, how also teachers and citizens are involved in this process, no, to help, yeah, reintroduce, no, because we talk about lifelong learning, now that then also these citizens come into play and they have to readjust, readapt, no, to make the most, no, perhaps of this time here, which will be short or long, we don't know, but it's very, very interesting. And you mentioned also vocational training, which of course it's a bit more complicated, I would say, because with the recognition of qualification it's an interesting topic, which helps to move to actually our next speakers, which speaker, Irene Sifidou, senior expert at the CEDEFOP, the European Center for Development and Vocational Training, which will give actually an overview of VET, so vocational education and training and inclusion in Europe. And just to give a brief introduction, as you know, like we hear more and more now about the need to give a greater impulse, no, to the green and digital transition to speed up, but also with the promise, let's say, to leave no one behind, as highlighted, for instance, in the Agenda 2030 or the European Social Pillar, no? So that has a key role to making sure that this transition doesn't negatively impact vulnerable groups in vulnerable areas. And well, today we look in particular at young adult migrants. So perhaps, yes, Irene, you can help us look into how VET can help us achieving a fair and just transition, and what are the current tools available to not let, to keep the learners and this vulnerable group interested in learning.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very, very much. I mean, you couldn't really better introduce this topic. I think your introduction is much more interesting of the one that I was thinking. So would you, I cannot, maybe because I entered from the link of another colleague, I cannot share. Could you please share my presentation, because it says that it is disabled.
So if you have it ready, we can quickly make you a host, if you prefer that.
Great. Yes, that would be fantastic, so that I can share myself. Still not possible.
I'm sorry, this is... colleagues, if you see her quicker in the list of participants, because I'm trying to... You can do... oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. So, voila, now. Okay.
Excellent. Right. So I think now it will work.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is what happens actually when one person hasn't been in the office for almost 3 years. And this is my first time after all this pandemic period being able to be back at CEDEFOP, and you realize that your normal working situation and all digital devices around you have changed greatly since you left. So thank you again, Anna. I mean, Bruno gave a very, very interesting presentation of the hottest things that now happen in Europe. And at CEDEFOP, we also look into how vocational education and training can be a life jacket for refugees, and how can really help them to integrate into education and training. However, today I will go a bit broader. I will present you in more general what is the work that we do at CEDEFOP on inclusion in general, because you know that inclusion, it's not only about refugees, it's about so many different profiles of people with so many different needs. You may know that vocational education and training has a dual mission. This is of promoting both excellence and inclusiveness. I'm not sure how far we've been with both of them. However, in the team that I lead at CEDEFOP, our work concentrates on how to promote inclusion both in vocational education training, but also through VET. So we've started a long time ago. It's almost since the Education and Training 2010, when we started investigating more particular that the role of vocational education and training vis-a-vis early leaving, because there was a lot of literature about early school leaving, but there was no, and still there is not much data to show you what is this phenomenon and the magnitude of this phenomenon in vocational education and training. So we have published a study a few years ago, which is a pan-European overview of the early leaving, of tackling early leaving in vocational education and training, where for the first time we brought VET into the perspective, not only being blamed for increasing rates of early leaving in Europe, but also being an important mean for preventing early leaving from happening. Anna mentioned the transitional phases, which are indeed those that learners face the greatest risk to drop out from one system to another. The European Commission has prepared a new recommendation for Council conclusions on the pathways to school success, and this is where they try really to fight early leaving and to be able to have more flexibility and more connectivity among the different education and training pathways. So from our side, what we did, it was to furnish new data to be able to show how VET can really be a help to fight the rates of early leaving and to support the new Education and Training 2030 strategic framework for lowering the rates of early leaving to below 9%. So we do that through various means, of course, peer learning activities. We are in EU high-level thematic working groups. We conduct research, as I said. But what I want to show you more today are these online toolkits that we have developed, and we hope that will be of help to both policymakers and VET practitioners in Europe. So this is the VET toolkit for tackling early leaving, that has been published for quite a few years now, and is constantly dynamically enriched with new resources. This is a platform, an online platform, where one may find all information needed for the whole policy cycle. You may see that we have sections about identify, so basically is how to identify the needs to address a problem, so to design a policy, how to intervene, how to implement this policy, and how to evaluate this policy. Today, we count with more than 280 different resources on this online platform that are all based on analytical work and on research behind it. So it's not just a database, a compilation of different good practices and so forth, but there is a lot of analytical work behind it. For example, through research, we have developed the different profiles of young people at risk of dropping out, or those who are already early leavers. And we explain how these different profiles and these different needs should be addressed with tailored policies. So from the 17 intervention approaches that you see, which actually are now 18, because we just published one on digital inclusion a few days ago, we see how you really try to employ tailored-based interventions for the needs of the individuals, because when we talk about early school leavers, or when we talk about learners at risk of dropping out, they may have the same title, but they are completely different people with different needs and in very different situations and circumstances. And this is what we try really to promote this through this interactive toolkit, that each intervention approach should be very much tailored to their needs. We do through each intervention approach, we highlight good practices, but what we do from these good practices is that we really analyze the key characteristics that they have, because only these key characteristics can be transferable in different settings, in different contexts, and can be meaningful as illustrations of how you could design or implement a policy. I also want to draw your attention very quickly to the section of evaluation, where we have some interactive tools, reflection tools about how inclusive actually the vocational education and training system of your country is. And of course, these are reflection tools that you may reply being from different positions. So they're addressed to both national, regional, and local authorities, policymakers. And also we have reflection tools for VET practitioners to reflect about the competencies needed and the approaches adopted to be inclusive in their teaching practice. So these are interesting resources because we saw through our research that an area which is extremely underdeveloped is actually the monitoring and evaluation of policies addressed to tackling early leaving from vocational education and training. Just last year, we expanded this work to another target group, the NEETs, the people not in employment, education, or training. And we launched a similar toolkit to support the needs of these, as you see, different, again, profiles of young people at risk. And we have a similar structure, a similar layout of a toolkit for empowering young needs. You see that here the resources are fewer because it's still a work in progress and it's still a young project being developed. But here also there is the important link made between being an early school leaver for quite some period of time, where you find yourself at greater risk of social exclusion and of falling into the category of being a NEET. So we thought that it was important to expand our work towards this direction. These are the websites, but also my colleague Ariela Treves, who is with me today, can put the links into the chat, these and of various other tools that you may find interesting. So this is for the tackling early leaving and then NEETs one. Another strand of work at CEDEFOP is, of course, how to support VET teachers and trainers in acquiring the necessary competencies to be able to promote inclusion in teaching and learning. And we also do here a lot of research. We monitor national developments for the opportunities given, the policies for continuous professional development, up to what extent this continuous professional development really focuses on inclusive matters. And an important development in this area is a new feasibility study that we launched last year. And we will conclude at the end of this year with some results up to what extent will be possible at CEDEFOP to launch a pan-European survey of school principals, teachers, in-company trainers, and learners in initial VET. You all know TALIS. You know that TALIS mainly focus on general education, and only very few countries are able to report on VET. So our aim here is really to go into the initial vocational education and training and give the possibility to these actors, who are the key actors in VET, to raise their voice about the situations, opportunities, and challenges they face in teaching and learning in order to have enough evidence to inform and support policy making in Europe. I don't know how much time I have. For some reason, I don't see any watch around me, but please signal if it's too long. I finish in 1 minute. As Bruno mentioned, that I also said in the beginning, we also do some work and we mobilize all our efforts to see how VET can be helpful in times of crisis. So on the left, as I said, we do try to understand the different support that member states give to Ukrainian refugees for their integration into VET and the labor market. And on the right, you see that we are still exploring, and actually we launched now a new survey to understand what was the impact of the pandemic on the dropout rates. You know that this extended school closures due to COVID-19 in the whole world, unfortunately interrupted the learning procedure for all students, but especially for those who were already at risk of dropping out. it means perhaps that they didn't manage to finish their studies, they didn't manage to qualify, and we want to see if there was a direct impact of the health crisis on the enrollment rates and the dropout rates in initial VET. So I will finish by saying that I tried within 9-10 minutes to give you an overview of a work that we do for several years now in VET. And I wish to finish inviting you to join this work that we do. We have established this community of ambassadors for tackling early leaving. It's an online, it's a virtual community. We invite all of you with different profiles that you may have, because this is what we want. We want multidisciplinary people to be engaged, to join us in this community where we try to join our efforts and fight against social exclusion and early leaving from vocational education and training. So there is an online application. My colleague Ariela can give you the link also in the chat, and you can consider and see the work of this community and consider whether you wish to join us. And with this, I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Irene. And those are really great and practical resources. I have to say, we had the chance to get to know them already with our previous projects, so I can only recommend. And I know also on the website, I mean, you also have very much country-specific needs and research, so this is very interesting as well for our audience. So yes, I see a lot of links in the chat, so please and keep your questions for later. Now I think you gave us the perfect overview on what are the challenges for VET, and what the European Union also thanks to your agency, it provides a great data analysis and great tools. And on the other hand, it also we know that education is not main competencies of the EU as such, also in training, to vocational training, but more on the end of the member states. But of course, we have there are many tools, and on this note, I would like to actually give the floor to our next speaker, Maria Podlasek-Ziegler, policy officer at the European Commission. And we know that there are many funding opportunities there to support the inclusive programs for education and training. And of course, there is an evolving policy framework. So I would like to ask you in particular this, how is the policy framework has evolved at the EU level? And when it comes to practice, then what has the community of practitioners that are implementing these programs, how it helped shape the policy framework, what innovation has there been, that how are the these two dimensions within on each other. So please, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation to this webinar, and I would like to ask you a little help with my presentation. I don't know who is going to share the slides. Anna?
My colleague Joanna.
Yeah. Sorry for that. So generally, I would like to outline indeed the recent EU policy development in the field of education and inclusion combined, how it is somehow mirrored, implemented in the Erasmus Plus program, and on the other hand, what we can learn from all these thousands of projects implemented within the program Erasmus Plus. Next slide, please. When speaking about policy, EU policy initiatives which are linked to education and inclusion, let me start with the European Pillar of Social Rights adopted in 2017, the major document and initiative, which already in the Principle 1 stresses the importance of education, training, and lifelong learning to create cohesive, fair, and flourishing societies and, of course, economies. At the level of the Directorate General for Education and Culture, we have a policy framework, Council recommendations on European education towards the European education area adopted last year. And this is actually the major framework for EU cooperation in the field of education. And as you can see, of course, inclusion and gender equality is one of the key dimensions of this framework. The main goal is to decoupling educational outcomes for socio-economic background, and this means the breaking of intergenerational transmission of disadvantage. Irena mentioned that we are working currently on a proposal for Council recommendation on pathways to school success. And this is like a flagship initiative of the European Education Area Initiative. And it is supposed to be adopted in June this year. And actually it is a continuation of the effort and work done so far at the EU level, but of course involving the member states to reduce the share of early school leavers from education and training on the one hand, but also to reduce the share of low achievers in basic skills. And this means in reading, maths, and sciences. But also there has been already certain achievements to be recorded, because over the last 10 years, the share of early school leavers has been reduced already by 4%. It is recognized that it is a big challenge at EU level, and this challenge is shared by many member states, and somehow new approach and new solution and new concept needs to be developed to tackle it further. That's why we are looking at a certain dimension which was not that prominently displayed in the previous activities, and this is well-being at schools. And this well-being is measured as pupils' sense of belonging. This means combating also bullying, cyberbullying, and tackling issues related to mental health. It is becoming obvious that well-being at schools is somehow conducive to academic achievement. So all these aspects need to be seen in connection. Next slide, please. In this way, we can say that we are combining novelty with continuity. And in this context, of course, it would be necessary to look also into the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and influx of non-EU migrants and refugees. Of course, this requires research, which can take some time to get, let's say, more comprehensive insights. We have three dimensions when we speak about inclusion and school education: monitoring, prevention, intervention, and compensation. In the current approach, there is a strong focus on prevention, but of course, all the other dimensions needs to be tackled as well. So what would be the recommendations coming from this new thinking, new approach to inclusion in education? It is looking more not on the supposed deficits on individual learners, but rather on shortcomings of the educational systems. It means creating learning environments which would be in the first place more welcoming, more caring, more inclusive. And this is very strongly linked to the learning and teaching methods, which are shifting somehow to more learner-centered approaches, participatory approaches, hands-on approaches, learning by doing. And here we are coming to the integration of all ways and spaces of learning, formal, non-formal, and informal. When it comes to how to change the system, there is the idea to look at the whole again and apply the so-called whole school approach, which would mean integrating the whole school community. So not only teachers and learners, but also school managers, but also parents, but non-teaching staffs, and local community, local administration. And this would also mean, when we speak about this very much integrated approach, to combine like multidisciplinary teams of services dealing with young people and involving them in finding solutions. And this would mean youth work services, social services, housing, health, so everything would be related to education and well-being of young people and children. Next slide, please. Now, how these ideas are also reflected in the Erasmus Plus program. For the current period, 2021-27, we have a new inclusion and diversity strategy. This strategy has been developed in a truly cross-sectoral approach. As you may know, Erasmus Plus program covers all educational sectors, formal and non-formal. So the basic idea behind this inclusion and diversity strategy is to widen and the access to the program and the inclusiveness of the program. And this would mean, in practical terms, reducing the barriers to participation in Erasmus+. And also the underlying principle would be to perceive diversity as a source of mutual learning, mutual enrichment, and not as a source of, let's say, barriers and problems and challenges. There is this supportive approach offered in the program and at many possible levels to organizations that apply to the program, but also to participants. And overall, the program should become like very much user-friendly when it comes to the selection process, to all the documents which are presented by the Commission. This is like the guiding principle. And again, all this should be shaped all together by all the sectors which could provide, yes, different and complementary insights. Next slide. I would like to point out to a recent study we have carried out, data collection and analysis of Erasmus Plus projects promoting inclusion in education. And as I mentioned, there are like thousands of projects which have this strong focus on inclusion, not only by involving young people with fewer opportunities, but also developing approaches, developing pedagogical concepts, how to tackle inclusion or exclusion at school. And here I would like to mention that the findings from this research have informed the pathways to school success. And you can recognize that lessons learned from these thousands of projects have been mirrored in the pathways proposal. So the main recommendation, the main lesson learned is to focus on local specificities and also on individual needs of learners, and not generally speaking on inclusion on a certain target group. It has been recognized that inclusion benefits actually all students. And again, the focus is on experimenting with different learning environments and learning opportunities. And indeed, there was this peer-to-peer mentoring highlighted strongly, as mentioned by one of the speakers. And of course, this new teaching and learning would require competences, new competences from teachers. So this professional development of teachers is also strongly present in the projects. Addressing inclusion is a long-term issue, So the focus has been very often on addressing the whole school culture, so that the whole school is becoming more inclusive, more welcoming, more supportive to each other, maybe with promoting this empathetic spirit within schools. And again, the stress is on including the whole school community, but also involving parents, families, and local communities. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce very briefly two projects from this case study which we conducted. The one is Offbook Project, and it is really a great example showing how educators from outside school can cooperate with teachers to create this inclusive way of learning, this very welcoming atmosphere using arts. And here, the outcomes of this project was really stunning, addressing many problems within the school, even including early school leaving and among disadvantaged groups. The next project, next slide, please, is about, let's say, underachievement in sciences, and there is a very interesting method called tinkering, which means thinking through hands. And this project's aim is to show pupils, students who consider that they are not good at sciences, that they actually can be very good at sciences through changing methods. And here is again a cooperation with science museums and schools, and showing also what can be done when joining such forces, let's say, from such different actors. It is actually all what I have prepared for today, so I would be happy to discuss later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's really nice to see how the learnings from Erasmus now are feeding this idea of learner-centered approach and the well-being of the students. Is feeding into the council recommendation, also into the policy. And of course, thank you for mentioning the cross-sectoral, holistic approach. That is what we're trying to do here as well. And in fact, the importance now of creating an ecosystem that works and fosters innovation for inclusion, innovation for inclusion. This is the word. I think I would just want to briefly state that previous speaker, Bruno, will leave us soon. So I just wanted to thank him again. And perhaps, Bruno, if you would like to share just one Twitter quote, I would say, so to make it very brief now on what perhaps resonated with you, with what you also just heard from other speakers, or perhaps just to stay in theme with what have been said, like what are more stakeholders that you would like to work with in your work?
Thanks, Anna. Yes, unfortunately, I will have to leave now for another commitment that I had previously engaged. I think in the end, the importance of vocational education and training it's very obvious, especially in such context of hardship and integration of people on the move. I think from the many examples that I have shared today, one that is very interesting to perhaps look a little bit with more details and care, it's actually what can be done at the local level, because it's really at the local level that these people are, and the integration happens at the city level, at the community level, at the regional level. So the example of Norway, for instance, that some communities will be fast-tracking training based on skills that have been identified as locally relevant is a clear indication of how the different families can be integrated, not only for children in schools where they should be, but also creating the supportive environment for the whole family and youth that may have already gone beyond the formal learning from the 12 grades and looking for their integration, not necessarily looking to higher education, but into a more vocational education training that is just as important. So I think this would be a key finding from this initial work that we intend to reinforce, and something that we would be very, of course, open to further discuss with any participants and within the network or outside. Again, it was a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to further comments and discussions on this topic and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruno. We look forward to that as well. And well, the Includ-EU project is continuing, so there are going to be also more opportunities to share and to meet local and regional authorities in this regard. Okay, thank you very much. And now on to Urania Xiluri, Director of the Athens Lifelong Learning Institute in Greece. And actually she will, we were talking about practitioners, so she has a very concrete example to present, a project that is coming to an end on capacity building, which is called School for Inclusion. And I know you actually have a school emergency as well, so I know that she cannot stay later, so eventually if you have a quick question you want to drop in the chat, she will get it, she will answer it just after the presentation. So thank you, Urania, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Give me a minute to share my screen.
Okay, you can see it.
So, hello everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It is for me a great pleasure to be here today among so many experts in the field of inclusive education and to be discussing all these issues of how to unlock the potential of education and training as key enablers to inclusion. So the Athens Lifelong Learning Institute is a research and education institute based in Athens, Greece. We are an NGO organization that has an active interest in a number of issues, such as social inclusion, discrimination, and suppression of human rights. And we have attempted through the implementation of innovative learning methodologies to moderate their impact. I would say that the core and kernel of our activities is inclusion. And our work targets many of the so-called vulnerable social groups, such as Roma, prisoners, ex-prisoners, and people of migrant, refugee, and asylum-seeking background. And of course, due to our nature, all of our work is guided by a very firm belief that education in all of its forms, formal, non-formal, and formal, is the single most powerful tool to achieve social inclusion and personal development. So as mentioned by Anna, today I will be presenting an important intervention that aims to address the specific needs of children of migrant and refugee background for educational social inclusion by presenting a model of democratic and inclusive school development based on human rights principles and guidelines of intercultural learning. This project, which is an Erasmus project that we just heard, funded by the European Union, is titled Schools for Inclusion. And this project started amidst the so-called Greek refugee crisis some years ago, when thousands of refugees and their families were crossing the Greek borders in hope of a better future in Europe. Both research findings, but our experience also had showed that migrant children were facing multiple challenges in European educational systems. These challenges, as we all know, are complex and intersectional and include issues such as a lack of proficiency in the host country language, limited or interrupted prior formal education, and usually patchy institutional knowledge about how schools and systems work in the host countries. As a result, children of migrant backgrounds saw significant gaps in academic performance. We already heard many things today We heard that these children tend to have lower levels of academic performance, higher early school leaving rates, over or under representation in certain school types. And as a general comment, we would say that they have difficulties in gaining a foothold in the European labor markets. So,
sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing the slides moving. Perhaps if you can just make it full screen, so because I think it got stuck, the slides. Thank you.
Okay, it seems to be full screen in my case.
Okay.
Maybe
so now we are at the second slide. I don't know if you moved on. So this is just.
So again, I would say that all the above mentioned things that we just discussed can feed into a vicious cycle of intergenerational poverty and social exclusion. Or in other words, what we could say is that cracking this immigrant education puzzle is at the heart of what brings us here together. What is Europe's integration challenge? So the premise of our project, the premise upon the Schools for Inclusion project is that education, particularly inclusive education, is the most powerful tool to integration, and that the school unit is one of the most powerful determinants of student achievement. Inclusive education may help improve social cohesion, improve language skills, prevent child poverty, and foster participation in the host society. And of course, that mainstream schools in Europe have the potential to become main drivers of migrant integration. Although governments in Europe have been at work for decades trying to make their education systems more responsive to the learning strengths and needs of diverse learners, progress towards this goal has been uneven. Even before the migration crisis created a further shock to these systems. To this end now, our project has proposed the elaboration of an effective strategy for the evolvement of the school into an inclusive environment conducive to the successful integration of children of migrant background. And this has happened drawing on two broad areas of educational discourse, as can be seen in the slide that is now being presented. The first one being the principles of inclusive education as processes of responding to the diversity of needs of all learners through increasing participation in learning cultures and communities and reducing exclusion from education. And the second one being the whole school approach as the approach of improving the quality of education that migrant children enjoy by involving all the dimensions of the school life, which may have an impact on educational achievement. And actually, when we talk about this second approach, we talk about a series of activities that better equip teachers to work with migrant children. We talk about mechanisms that support service providers, and we talk about the involvement of the community as a whole. So in this very broad context, our project proposed institutional changes to be made at the school level, including changes to school leadership, teaching methodologies, and school-home cooperation. School leaders and teachers need to learn how to establish a positive school and classroom climate for successful teaching and learning that treats diversity as a resource rather than an obstacle. And with a whole school approach, what we support is migrant students to be provided not only specialized courses, as has been the case in many of the countries that have been receiving until today big number of migrant population, my country also included, but what we propose is an integrated way across the curriculum and throughout all school and after school activities. In more concrete terms, now what our project proposed is two distinct components, one of them being titled the Inclusive Schools Methodology and Guidelines, and the second one titled the Inclusive Education Toolbox. As for the Inclusive Schools Methodology and Guidelines, this is a comprehensive step-by-step strategy that incorporates all the elements that are required for the successful conversion of the ordinary school into an inclusive one, such as the methodologies, what we have called the so-called action plan and a series of capacity building activities. While the second one, the inclusive education toolbox, on the other hand, has been an all-in-one resource that has provided resources which are required by educators in order to implement the inclusive education methodology. Now, the purpose of this so-called toolbox has been to provide the educators with the tools they need to build meaningful inclusive practices in the educational programs they provide. And this has been developed after an understanding that even the most experienced educators struggle usually with the challenge of designing and delivering meaningful inclusive practices in their schools. Thus, instead of spending time searching the internet, books, or journals for resources and ideas, this toolbox has developed into a comprehensive resource that combines research-based strategies and practical tools to help the design and implement a truly inclusive education program. As mentioned by Anna, now we are at the end of this intervention. This has been a 2-year period during which 20 schools throughout Europe have piloted successfully the inclusive education methodology. And through this process, they have constantly proposed new ideas for future improvements and sustainability of the project outcomes. Now these tools are available to any interested person and stakeholder. They are available in English, in Greek, in Spanish, in Portuguese, and Romanian. Here you can find the link for all these resources, and we kindly invite everybody to use them. And before closing, I share here 2 other links of 2 other very relevant and important projects in the field of inclusive education for children of migrant origin. It is and the MUFOCOM project. The first one, the PROUD project, has an emphasis on unaccompanied minors. So this is all from me.
Thank you very much, and we will share the presentation if, with all the participants later, so you can access the links to all these useful tools that have been created as a result of this project. And no, I don't know if there are any questions now for you. Okay, if not, I might have a quick question, just because you mentioned this comprehensive approach to making school more inclusive. And actually, in our last webinar, we talked about spaces, and more specifically about innovative housing solution, but also public spaces. And so my question is about how perhaps the spaces issues intersect in a way with educational needs, and maybe if in your toolbox do you take this aspect into consideration, because we know space also influence interaction, and there are many ways, I guess, to make the spaces more inclusive, perhaps from avoiding segregation to the more polemic issues, I don't know, crucifix in the classroom. So maybe, I don't know if there is something on this, because it's I think it's an aspect that is very important.
Yes, the issue of space is very important when we talk about the issues of inclusion in European classrooms. And this has been taken into consideration in a series of ways, if I could mention. Taking into consideration that the space of a school found in a remote Greek island is different than the space of a school found in big urban centers, in Athens, for example. What has been interesting, and I think that what would help in its use, teachers have been able to use a number of filters in the search of the tools, and these options can be also taken into consideration and account.
Okay. Thank you very much. So
thank you for the invitation. It was a great pleasure to be here.
us, our two. So thank you very much, Urania. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm just speeding up now to a full Includ-EU focus. So we are looking with Eleonora Milazzo. She's our expert on the research and immigration and policy consultant at the King's College London, and she has been working in collaboration with Includ-EU to prepare some thematic briefing. And today I'm actually very excited to present you the live launch. She will present you the live launch of the thematic briefing on access to education, and in particular, maybe you can tell us a bit more about the findings of the briefing. And also, yes, with what about your research, what resonated with you, what has been said so far, what can you see as common findings? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you all for having me here this afternoon. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it all right. Can you see it? Yes. Good. So as you anticipated, I'm going to present the key findings of the Includ-EU briefing, which is going to be launched now on education. I invite you all to take a look at the briefing itself, because you will find more information in it on what the project partners, the 6 Includ-EU countries, all the project partners have shared on this topic, both in terms of challenges to education access that they encounter in their national context, but also when it comes to good practices that they are experimenting with. So the key question that we want to address in the briefing in this project is how we can make education more accessible and inclusive for all. And answering this question is important because education is a universal human right, but it is also a precondition for empowerment, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers. Access to education, this is also what we briefly analyze in the policy brief. It's still difficult in the countries that we look at, both in in-person education context, but also in digital learning environment, which have now become particularly crucial in the current context. So the key is really to try and reflect on what tools we have at our disposal to make sure that especially third country nationals can access to and participate in education in the countries where they live. So as for the structure of the briefing, what you find there is, first of all, some background analysis of access to education, as well as an overview of the good practices that the countries which are part of this project shared as particularly meaningful, and then the policy recommendation, which I'm going to focus on today in particular. So the recommendations that I'm going to illustrate focus on 5 fields, if you want, which we think are particularly crucial when it comes to making education more inclusive. The first one is intercultural capacity building and teacher training, language training for students, learners, but also building reciprocal trust, developing intercultural skills, and addressing specific needs. So let me now go through each one of these and also draw your attention to some of the examples, of the practical examples that you are going to find in the briefing as well. So the first finding that we discussed in the briefing is that intercultural capacity building and teacher training are often lacking and should be expanded further to make sure that school staff all school staff is equipped to manage intercultural communication, but also and receives specific training on how to engage with students from culturally diverse background and support them in developing their potential, but also to improve social connection, social bonds in school, and update the school curriculum to the new demographics of learners, if you want. So an example of this is the project Schools for All in Greece, which provides intercultural training activities to headmasters, teachers, but also families, precisely according to what has been mentioned before as the whole school approach. So not just the teaching staff, but all the school staff and families of students as well. Another example that I'm going to flag here and that you will find in the briefing is Aula Intercultural, so in intercultural classroom. This time, it's a virtual platform offering content on interculturality, diversity management in Spain, but that is being used by users in other countries as well, like Peru, Argentina, and Mexico. So a very interesting way also to reflect on how we can use digital tools to make education up to speed. The second finding that we examine in the briefing is the language training can be improved, and that should be accessible to all students from an early stage to support their entry into the mainstream education system and later down the road to the labor market as well. So what's important, I think, to underline is the language training in the host country, in the host country's language should capitalize on the students, the learners, existing language skills, not to just overlook them in a way, and be delivered in a way that does not reinforce any existing stigma or stigmatization. You will find many examples of how this can be achieved in practice, but here I'm going to focus on an online tool developed in Romania for language learning in some parts of the country at the regional level within a broader framework of practice and knowledge exchange on integration. And in this case, as part of these online tools, an educational resource package has been provided, including Romanian language resources and a conversation guide. The third point, it is crucial, and this has been stressed already, it is crucial to build reciprocal trust in education environments, and this is to avoid that, especially it is third country nationals find them are stigmatized or isolated from the rest of their learning community. And an effective way, and this of course can have profound effects on their mental health, on well-being, on school performance as well. And an effective way to achieve this is through peer-to-peer support and mentoring initiatives. There are reciprocal and mutually beneficial form of exchange between peers. So for example, in Italy, the project mentorship promotes mentorship schemes in higher education institutions in Italy through partnerships between various ministries and universities in the country. And it's part of a broader framework of initiatives that aim at making higher education more accessible for students with a migrant background, also through simplified admission procedures, which recognition of qualifications, which we know are huge barriers in many countries to access to education. So the fourth area that Includ-EU countries in a way reflected upon is intercultural skills development, and this time targeting third country national students, learners, and their families. So not just teaching staff or school staff, but students and families as well. And here it's a really encompassing field, if you want, where more work can be done, because it really comes to making sure that third country nationals are in a position where they can acquire knowledge about the education system, how to navigate administrative services as well in the host country. And so this means really strengthening their intercultural skills. And here again, you will find many examples in the briefing.
Exactly, Eleanor. Sorry, I would suggest if we have all the example in the briefing, perhaps we just skip the example only to perfect. No, just because we need to rush a bit. But yeah, please continue.
Yes, so let me just yes. So. The fifth area, in fact, is about addressing specific needs, and so as we know, achieving learning outcomes can be more challenging for children living in disadvantaged conditions. We, as mentioned, unaccompanied minors, for example, living in non-urban areas, but also underrepresented groups like Roma and Sinti. So here a very interesting project that you will read about tries to promote greater representation of this group in education systems as well. So let me just draw to a close here. The keywords that we would like to share with you are, first of all, intercultural teacher training and capacity building, additional language training from an early stage that we know is still key. Then mentoring, greater participation, and tools to develop mutual trust, also to avoid stigma and segregation in learning environments, intercultural skills to navigate the education system, and greater representation of specific education needs, especially of more disadvantaged learners. And I think there's going to be more on IT training and the provision of digital tools as well in the next presentation. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonora. Indeed, you steal my word, because in fact that's really what we will see in a minute, that with Includ-EU we are also actually implemented some pilot projects. So all these findings, all these key findings are actually yes, being implemented in Slovenia, Jesenice, where our next speaker, Maja Radinović-Hajdić, Director of Adult Education Center, she will present this initiative they'll be carrying out. And so stay with us just a few minutes, because we'll have actually also a nice surprise, a nice video teaser. But please, Maja, we are all ears.
Thank you, Anna, for pronunciation of my name. It was great.
It was not easy today to say with all these names.
No, it was really great. Okay. Hvala lepa, lepo pozdravljeni. Hello, my name is Maja, I'm coming from Slovenia. I'm an adult educator for more than 30 years, so I really believe that lifelong learning is the most important thing in the world, and indeed I will try to convince you the same. So I would like to present you an Includ-EU pilot activity in Jesenice, Slovenia. Municipality of Jesenice has around 21,000 inhabitants, including more than 3,000 immigrants. Most immigrants are coming from Bosnia and from Kosovo. So Jesenice has a long tradition of very colorful cultural structure, but it did change after the former Yugoslavia take several parts. So before Slovenia became independent, a lot of immigrants were coming to Jesenice, but with minor linguistic and cultural barriers. So they were found it easier to integrate into the community. In recent years, the number of immigrants from linguistically, culturally less known backgrounds has been growing, so to integrate in our local community is not so easy anymore. Of course, the biggest problem is language, but still, since the COVID-19 emerged, I think that with all the restriction of face-to-face meeting, I think that adult education was most affected, and I will explain you why. Because in adult educations, we are dealing more or less with vulnerable target groups. And of course, they have their own characteristics, and that means that they have great barriers to transit to distance learning. And we saw that because, for example, I can explain you that motivational factors for learning, of course, you know, they are very, very, very important. But if you compare the motivation of adults with the motivation of youngsters, it is harder to harmonize those characteristics, because most of adults, also immigrants, of course, are part of non-formal education. So the motivation is totally different. So just to move from classic education to online education is not so easy, because we find out during the past 2 years that the lack of digital skills is one of the most important barrier for immigrants to join different activities. And of course, we have to move from talking about basic skills and about the most important competencies to life competencies, so that we have adapted the education not to each group, but to each individual, so that we are moving to, as a lot of people before me said, to the participant-centered learning, so that we can adapt the education to their needs, which are emerging right now. So maybe the needs for education are coming from the families, from schooling of their children, work, social integration. So we have to take that into consideration. That means that we cannot just set, okay, this is a program, a lot of experts were working on the program and that's it. No, that's not enough. The program must be tailor-made and adapted to each group and to each participant. So in Jesenice, we really have a holistic approach to the immigrants, because we created a network of organization which includes primary school, secondary school, kindergartens, labor office, health center, hospital, pharmacies, etc., etc. And in that network, we are all using one person as a cultural linguistic mediator who is helping with problems that occurs not only with the immigrants, but also with the people who are working with immigrants. For example, with the teachers in schools who are dealing with children, and when the parents are coming to school to talk about the development of their children, our cultural linguistic mediator helps that. The most important thing for us is that no person is entering our program without counseling. So we, in the scope of Includ-EU, made a program, tailor-made program that we called Local Digital. I will explain about that later also. And it's very important that we are following these steps. So first, we did a pre-assessment of skills. You know that immigrants are very different. Some of them are on that level, on that level, on that level. So both in language and in digital skills. So we first did the pre-assessment. Of course, we did the individual counseling, and then we developed a program. And the program is divided in different groups from different level of knowledge for each immigrant. And of course, during the program implementation, we are also offering individual counseling, but not just counseling. We are also offering some sort of the help with the help of volunteers. Maybe if somebody, some participant is stuck somewhere, we offer additional hours with the individual help. We are right now in the stage of ex-post assessment of skills. So now we will evaluate how successful we were with this tailor-made program, and then we will adapt the program towards the finding. And of course, we will do a new circle. So even if we will get adapted program, we will adapt it again when the new circle of participants will start. We will again do the pre-assessments, and then we will see to what we have to focus during the implementation. Okay, a little bit about tailor-made program. It's called Local Digital. So the main goal of the program is communication in Slovene and understand the language, both in real and digital environment. So you can see that both parts of the program are very connected. So you cannot do one without another. So the first part, Slovene language skills, include the basic language competences and the basic digital capabilities. The second part, totally equivalent to the first, is getting to know the physical, and digital local environment. So the learning is taking place also in the environment, and we are combining both. So physical, we are going to the library, for example, and present their characteristic to the immigrants. And we also, for example, visit a virtual museum in local community so that they can get both knowledges. Okay, so now a little about the numbers. You are probably interested. So we did enroll 29 immigrants at the beginning. We begin after New Year. And then we, after the pre-assessment, put together 2 groups. So we put participants in 2 groups. And in each group, we implemented 120 hours. That combines the group work and also the individual group. Okay, sorry, my mistake. 120 group hours in both groups, so 60 in each, and also 100 individual hours. As I told you, it was counseling, it was voluntary help, etc., etc. And we are now completing the program, and number of immigrants that will complete the program is 21. So we were quite successful. Some of the participants got a job, etc., etc. So they didn't finish. What I would like to stress here before I end, I would like to thank you, Slovenia, because they invited us to be a part of this project, like a pilot, because we do have good practice, but still we are constantly searching for funds and for opportunities to offer more to immigrants in the local community. So piloting like that is offering us to develop something new, something that will serve us as a means for better education of immigrants in future. And of course, I would like to thank you all for your attention. Right now, across the hills in our municipality, these flowers are blossoming. We are very famous of that, as you can see, a lot of them. So again, thank you very much, and very welcome if you want to ask me any additional questions.
Thank you very much, Maya, really, for your commitment, for your presentation, and it's very nice to see how you also involved all the end user, no, in the design of this tailored program. So maybe if I can have all the remaining speaker like pinpoint spotted, let's say, so that we can just briefly close together before we launch the 1-minute teaser video, and then we let everybody go on. So thank you very much. I know Emanuela is also there, and Maria. So, well, nothing. So maybe Maria and Emanuela, that you intervene at the beginning. You will have like a small final remark on your side. Otherwise, I don't see question in the chat, so we can just launch the video as you feel free to intervene.
So maybe few words. Actually, it was very interesting and really inspiring to listen to these presentations. And I would think that there are many common thoughts and ideas behind how to tackle inclusion in education, although presented from different perspectives, from different sectors, but it is clear that this systemic change is very much needed. So focusing, of course, on the one hand of individual needs and creating learning environments which are really welcoming and supportive and caring at the same time. But on the other hand, really looking at the education systems in a new way, right? Like this, like an ecosystem of many actors coming together and yes, sharing and contributing. I would say this is like the common thread which I heard throughout the presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, yes, indeed. Manuela, maybe just Twitter quote on your side.
Yeah, just to thank all of you for very interesting inputs you have shared. And I think it was a great occasion to, advocate on all these topics. And I very much agree with Maria. I think that the interesting, the added value today was the different perspectives which have been shared. So I think it's, from IOM side, it was very interesting to listen to all of your experience and content. So yeah, thank you very much. And we'll have other occasions, I hope, to share and to meet each other. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, we are very glad that we managed to bring together all these different actors and that you really stayed until the end. Thanks to you, Maya. You made them very engaged. So nothing, I want to thank all the participants, and we will follow up with an email with all the relevant links and tools. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much again. Have a nice afternoon. Joanna, we launch the video and then we say goodbye. Thank you.
Jesenice so večkulturno mesto, dom številnih priseljencev nekdanje Jugoslavije.
To se pravi, da je Ljudska univerza Jesenice prva postaja oziroma so naša vrata prva vrata, na katere potrkajo priseljenci.
Moje ime je Morisa, prišla sem v Slovenijo iz Bosne. Na Jesenice sem prišla leta 2019, kjer mož tukaj dela in sem s hčerko prišla tukaj zaradi združitev družine.
Ukolikor želimo resnično vplivati na povečevanje socialne vključenosti priseljencev, bomo definitivno morali poskrbeti tudi za razvoj digitalnih spretnosti, ne samo za razvoj znanja slovenskega jezika.
Ljudska univerza Jesenice pomeni mi vse, ker mi je dala zelo veliko, pomagala mi pri učenju slovenskega jezika, dala mi je upanje, da zmorem.
Thank you very much, everyone. And yes, looking forward to the full video, no?
Yes, it looks amazing. Thank you. So we are really looking forward to the whole video. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.